Hello, and welcome to another episode of the How to Scale a Business podcast. My name is Hector Santiesteban, and I am your host. Our special guest is Mr. Ryan Pereus, and he is the Cold Call CEO. He is the Cold Call Godfather, and we are going to talk about that and maybe just sales and growing your business and scaling your business as always. But Ryan, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
You help a lot of people, and I'm sure what I love about getting to talk with people like you is you see a large sample size and you've been able to apply it to a lot of different industries. But I'm curious what were the important stops along the way that sort of, got you to this point? And then I'd love for you to share a little bit about specifically what you do with clients today.
Yeah. So, when I first got into this, I was on Fiverr, and we can get more into that, writing cold call scripts and doing training. And I thought that I had a couple different ideas about how to go about cold calling that I hadn't been taught, but was discovering through osmosis. But I also needed to test those in more markets than just the few that I had experience in. So when I was doing consulting and things, people would say, "Hey, we like your scripting, your messaging, and we also like your training, but we actually just never ever want to do these calls. So could you do them for us?" And that kind of became this. First of all, it was a hurdle because it's like, oh my gosh, like, that's not what I signed up for. I wanted to be like the fun consultant who comes in, you pay me 5, 6 figures, and then I walk out and everyone's happy, and not really do the gritty, grindy work of cold calling for other companies. But I thought in order to be the best, we couldn't just have experience in a couple industries. Like, we really had to learn, I think, the way that humans connect through multiple industries and titles, markets, all sorts of products. And I think that's kind of what brought us to where we are, to like be the experts. Or, it's easy to say self-proclaimed best, but why we would have kind of like to put our name in that hat, because of all those things we learned from all the industries, which is really ends up being a bigger study on how, humans connect in the B2B world from 0 to 1.
Yeah, that's so much of what we do in our world is, media and connecting through content. And what I
Hmm.
think the best, cold callers, if you will, is like they are able to create that connection. They're able to create
Yeah.
that relatability, whether that's through need or desire or whatever, that's really what they're looking to do is
Yeah.
that connection is required first and then a relationship, because oftentimes, these contracts that people are selling, they're significant investments, and that usually requires a deep level of trust. I'm curious, when people are getting into your space, and we'll sort of maybe dive deeper into the Fiverr thing, or kind of how you got started, but I'm curious about the mistakes either that people are making once they get into it, and you see them getting into business development in this sort of way, or some of the misconceptions that people have about cold calling and about the space in general.
I would say that there's a lot of client education that goes into what we do. And setting expectation was one of like the big lessons that we learned early on, because our industry is very jaded. There's a lot of people that have a negative stigma, not just against cold calling as a channel, but adding to outsourced sales development companies being sleazy, untrustworthy, no credibility, talk a big game, but can't deliver. There's just so much fear versus like you buy a computer, and a personal computer, and you expect it to work, and it generally works. If you have issues, you take it back. It's an easy process compared to us. Like, they're expecting something like ChatGPT, but in the 90s or 2000s. Like, they just have these expectations that are far beyond potentially, or just different. And so it's our job. What we've learned as part of our delivery is educating the client on how cold calling actually works in the 21st century, and undoing a lot of those things before we get into an agreement. Because if we don't, then you can find out later how, if you didn't talk about it early, they had assumptions, you had different assumptions, and then they clash. And it's all about that journey of cold calling. Like, forget the relationship. It's more about where they are along that path of figuring out how it can work. There's so many different variables that are involved, from the messaging to the target to the SDR training. But probably the biggest blind spot is the one that a lot of our clients, or just people, and not even our clients, just general market, doesn't figure out, which is the fact that their product or service might not be that relevant for cold calling. might not resonate as much as they would like. And that has nothing to do with cold calling, regardless of who it is, whether you're doing it with outsourced company or inbound or in-house. A good example, right, is today in 2025, it is no longer the newest trend to be a website design company. I remember when we first got started, 2015, 2016, it was a little bit more on the cutting edge still. People were still transitioning from yellow pages and hard copy directories to building their own website, right? And then showing up in SEO and things like that. I mean, everyone has a website. So imagine me going right now and saying, "Hey, we'd love your customers to find you. How about we get you in this thing called the yellow pages?" It's a great idea. And you're like, "Dude, that was 30 years ago. Where have you been?" Right? But if I were to transition the same company with the same capabilities, say, "Listen, we'd love to have you show up for your customers that are trying to find you in GEO searches." This is the new term, right? Generative engine optimization. How are you able to show up in ChatGPT and Gemini and all these machines? But same company, completely different message that resonates with where the audience is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Is there businesses that it's not good for, right? Like if you can't make that adjustment or can't find that adjustment in messaging, is there types of either industries or businesses that you say, a different
Yeah,
method of
we
marketing
ended
is
up
just where
making
you
this
should be?
pyramid called the product resonance pyramid. I'm happy to send it to you for anyone that's watching. We can send a link or whatever. But we kind of made this pyramid that was essentially products or services that, kind of in current state and it can change. First, were commodities, right? Maybe we throw that yellow pages down there or like CD players, right? Or tape decks, something that's completely outdated. But right above that is what we consider established businesses. So you think about like IT MSP companies, those were really hot 10, 15 years ago. Cybersecurity, things like that, right? Commercial insurance, any common business offering that's established industry. And then it could go up from there, right? Like a high value offering would be something kind of higher up that food chain. And maybe that's something a little bit more service based, a little bit more nuanced. Maybe it's that web design company, but they work specifically with companies who produce podcasts. And so they have a niche, and it's like, oh, wow, these guys really actually work with companies like mine. They stand out, right? And then you can go all the way up to the top, which we consider unique, rare, innovative products or services to the market. A lot of companies are vying for that AI tool or whatever that's going to be the next big thing for their market. We have a client of ours that is called The Great Game, and I love using them as an example because they're a digital escape room adventure app. Okay, hang with me here. A digital escape room adventure app for colleges, universities, and high schools across the country. So imagine a student opens up their phone, they download the Great Game app, and it's like augmented reality in the style of Pokemon Go to learn the campus when they're first in orientation there. And it's going gangbusters for cold calling. Like we're getting an appointment every 50 calls or so. So identifying like where you are, like we're setting that with every caller that we have, but the ones that are more difficult may require more sales skills, more creativity in the way we deliver the messaging, because it's maybe a saturated marketplace. It's one that everyone has, so it's hard to like knock off their current systems since they're already in motion.
I'd love to get into some of the specifics because you talked about messaging and you talked
Yep.
about, offer, and those I think are valuable. But you said something before about, what cold calling in 2025 looks like. I'll just juxtapose it with, I think, I have a unique, I don't know if it's advantage or whatever, but my first job out of high school was in sales, and it was in 2009 where we were still making phone calls,
Yeah.
like social media wasn't a thing. We were still dialing the phone.
Right.
And so I have one idea of it. Some people think it looks like the Wolf of Wall Street, where people are, in a
Boiler
call
rooms.
center, yeah, boiler room sort of stuff. But what does modern day, 2025 cold calling actually look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think the setting changed physically, right? Like most of us are remote. You don't see those rooms as much anymore. There are still some after COVID that have been brought back. But I don't even think it's necessarily about that. I mean, the tech is probably the one thing that's changed. You know, we have a lot of tools that are integrating other channels within the platform. Take just simple example of Apollo. You can build a list within the platform, call and email all together within, 5-10 minutes. You can find a target list, set it up, and start calling and emailing right from there. And so I think technology's changed. So you have all these different types of dialers. It's not that dialers have been completely different in the last 10 or 15 years, but you have like manual all the way up to power or auto dial. Okay, so sequential dials, but automatically calling the next one once you're done with one. And then up to predictive dialers where they're calling 5 or 6 at one time. And so whoever answers, they talk to that person, but then the other 5 are hung up on. As well as agent assisted, or there's all sorts of other little nuances to that. But some of those things are like the technology and how we're going about it with tech. But I also think that conversation has changed a little bit. I don't think it's as fast. The messaging and the way we speak to people doesn't evolve as much as, say, like email, right? I mean, I remember when I first got started 10 or 15 years ago, you would do like an email letter, and have a letterhead, and you'd say, you write this professional introduction white paper, right? And then people started getting in the hang of that. And you know how it is with email, the volume increased so much that everyone got inundated. So it went from a full paper to 250 words down to 150 to 75. And then now it's like a one line or a text. And then add in personalization or personalized relevance. So when it comes to cold calling, it's back to that. The conversation's changed a little bit. Maybe not as aggressive, assertive, but not aggressive, being okay with other types of dispositions other than the appointment, getting away from pay by appointment models with cold calling. So there's a lot of different things that have changed, but hopefully that helps name a few and a couple examples.
Yeah, I think it should open up people's mind to layering what's possible with technology. Right?
Yeah.
I think obviously AI, and I'd love to get your opinion on that in a little bit, but that's changed things. But even before that, just the scale and the volume at which you can do, I think a lot of people don't realize, and maybe people will get freaked out by it, but how easily you can get people's contact, info,
Oh, yeah.
and now with today's automation tools, put it into some sort of sequence that just goes. And so my brain is turning. When we get back from break, I'd love to see if there's anything more on the, system or the tool side that you think is relevant. But I'm really curious because it seems like so much of the value that you bring is in the messaging, helping, create that desire that sees, 1 in 50, that, gives them the need to, want to book a call. And so we're going to get into that right after this quick break. Hey, y'all. Today's episode is brought to you by Amplify Media, and we are a podcast and content production company. Well, we actually like to think of ourselves as the fractional media part of your company because chances are, if you're listening to this, you probably have a product, a passion, a mission, a message, some sort of service that you're trying to get out to the world, but you might not have the time, the team, or the tech skills to be able to do it. Well, if that's the case, we can help. Go to amplifymedia.com. That's AMPLAFY media.com. You can also check the show notes for the link. And with that, let's get back to Ryan. So Ryan, I'll let you choose. I read my first lit RPG. I'm in the middle of I'm in the middle of my second one, and so it's like choose your own adventure back when we were young.
Uh-huh.
And I'll let you dictate where this goes because I'm curious if you think that there's more to talk about in the systems and the methodology of what you guys do, or if you think that so much of the secret sauce is really in the messaging and how you position what it is that you guys are selling.
I would say that latter part there for sure. I would go in that direction because I think it's a lot easier to talk about tech and systems and automations that can help us, and also blaming it on our quality of our campaign on the list. And I need better data. I need better titles. I need those types of parts that are truly important. But I don't think salespeople realize the lack of education they have on how cold calling works to produce the type of quality that's taken us years for us to see, and then we continue to improve upon. I think people assume that because they have the gift of gab, not only can they set appointments, but that they can scale it or teach other people their style, and they assume it's just going to work if they do exactly as they do.
And when you're looking at a company's messaging and if you're going to take over, are there certain things that you're looking to see? Obviously product market fit is going to be a huge thing, but once it's there, is there a checklist or is there sort of a diagnostic that you sort of look at? And what might be some of those elements that business owners can look to dial in?
So we look at cold calling from what we consider the four elements of cold call success model. So we train our account strategists on it, and they're anything that you can consider a variable within cold calling specifically fall under these four variables, which are one, like I've mentioned before, product relevance, probably the biggest mover out of the four, because what we've seen is more product relevance, the easier it is for people who aren't as skilled at cold calling to have success with it, which means it's very product forward. Another one is target market accuracy, how well not only the industries are targeted, but how good the data is. So to those folks who are data heavy, it's important. Number three is messaging strength, how well that product relevance is then wordsmithed in a way that resonates with the audience that you're talking to. And that's a factor. And then lastly is SDR fit, how well they're trained, how well that dialect or accent can hurt or help a marketplace, the personality type, are they more direct, kind of that mid-Atlantic, Northeast direct approach, or more of a Southern draw, or softer style, more passive. All those things matter. So those are kind of the four things to think about when you're kind of developing a campaign.
Yeah, I would imagine that a lot of our listeners are pretty, established in sort of what they sell. But what I'm hearing is that how they're packaging it and how they're presenting it could actually make a huge difference, especially if they're in some of these industries that, are lower on that pyramid. I would imagine that, you're not going to tell every business owner to get out of business and, change industries, but that there is some value in the packaging and how you're presenting to create this connection, this desire.
Yeah. So what we do is we kind of help identify where they are starting on that pyramid. And then we just know what we have to do from there. Do we have to really, really package the messaging? First of all, can we bring them up in the scale? What are things about your service that help? And sometimes it takes some layers to get through. For instance, like it doesn't mean you have to have the next iPhone or ChatGPT or whatever, right? Like you could simply have some customers that we didn't know about that would be worth saying in the first line or two, right? Like if you've worked with bigger companies or recognizable in your industry, then that can raise the value of what you're doing, because it's all about cold calling is about building trust in the product, people that's calling and the process. So if you can build trust in the product through accolade, you don't have to have the next iPhone. You don't have to change who you are.
Yeah.
So that's
Some
part of
people
it.
aren't highlighting the things that are already there that are really going to get someone to get you to the next point. Because I think that, like, one thing that I learned is it's sort of, okay, get the appointment. If you can get the appointment, then you can sell there. Like, it's about getting them to the next place. And so if this sort of thing gets you 5, 10, 15 more seconds of time, why wouldn't you highlight that if it's something that you've already done? It's things you already have attributed to.
And that's right. I think we say that there's three main objectives to a cold call. One is to, yes, sell the next step, but first, so sell the next step of a meeting, but first you have to spark interest in the product or service you're offering so that they actually show up to the thing. It's one thing to get someone forced into a meeting, which is a lot of reasons why we get these pay by performance. People who have used pay by performance companies come to us because the companies that they were using, they were getting paid and feeding their family only if they got a meeting, on a calendar. So you better believe they got meetings on a calendar. Whether or not those prospects knew why they were there, were forced to that call, or felt guilty because they knew that the only way they're going to get that person that called was going to get paid is if they showed up, right? They still came to the meeting, but it was not of quality. They didn't know what the product was. There was no like anticipation and thought between those two times, which is an important moment. So the value of what you're saying is important, and it's the more that you can lean into that and have a conversation that's back and forth and asking questions, opening up doors, parts of your mind that you didn't think about, and it creates questions and curiosity and overall interest. That can be what gets people to actually show up later. The third thing, right? We said sparking interest, selling next step, but then also what we consider diffusing the salesperson's stigma. So that's more or less like not making it feel like a sales call. We don't mind that it is a sales call. We just don't want it to feel like you're being pushed into something.
Yeah, I call it the timeshare effect, right? It's like
Mhm.
you don't want it to feel like that. Sales
Mhm.
process shouldn't feel like they're being forced to it. Couple more questions. One thing I do just want to get your opinion on is, AI and the state of where we're at here. Someone who has sort of a high level perspective of your industry. What are some things that are coming down the pipe, or that people should know about with regards to either what's possible or what's happening, or I'll let you kind of take it wherever you want there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say and say there's no risk at all. I think there is risk to our industry. There's like a slight threat of the ability for AI chatbots or AI agents to be able to have full on conversations and set up meetings. And I think it's already happening in some industries. I would say more B2C, simplified, limited conversations, maybe just about like scheduling and things, but actual conversations of value that are either nuanced or they're require a level of emotional intelligence to deliver on a call. Those are going to be harder and down the pike quite a bit. And so we haven't really seen any competition from AI agents. Actually, one person said we're going to try AI agents maybe like a few weeks ago or something. We lost one, our first one. So I knew it was happening, but it's pretty rare that we've really come across that. So I think it's just going to be a slower build to that. The other side of the issue, though, isn't so much that right now. And before I get into the second part, staying on AI agents, I think the other part of it it's making it a little difficult for AI is some of the laws around it. Like the AI has to say, at least in B2C telemarketing law, it has to say that it's AI. Would you like to go forward? Essentially, it has to be like opt-in. So that
Right.
doesn't give you an advantage if you're a robot, you know,
Yeah.
unless people are like, yeah, I'd like to hear what they're just like curious about product. So that's a hard part for them to get through. And we haven't really faced anything yet.
Yeah. Will be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah. The other part of it, though, is more of like, I don't know if you've heard about the iOS 26 update where the mobile phones are screening a little bit more intelligently than they have in the past. So you can have a setting on like your iPhone that is basically like screening the call and talking to you, right? Or me who's calling. And it leaves kind of like a subject line on the text, on the screen for the iPhone user. And then see if they
Hmm.
want to pick up the phone. So they're reading and not listening to who you are having those first few seconds sometimes. Now, we've only seen that. Like we did a study of all of our mobile numbers and other numbers. And we've seen that in August, I think it was, all of the leads that we had set, out of all the leads that we had set for that month for all of our clients, I think it was like 25% were mobile numbers, 75% were company or direct numbers. And then of those 25%, half of them or so were iPhone. So let's just say 12, 13% or around there were actually iPhones that people set leads from.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit on the lower side of actually how many are mobile numbers in business from the ones that we called. It's a different part of the conversation you probably weren't expecting, but it's still an AI feature on phones that could potentially have an issue, especially predictive dialers. Those are going to be dead in the water for calling iPhones.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of change in the regulation and some of these things. Like
Yeah.
just today or yesterday, ChatGPT said that they weren't going to give legal or health advice.
I saw that. Yeah.
What I didn't realize is that and it's probably true, is that the lobbyists, were big on there, making sure that those companies, didn't get
Mhm.
gassed out. This has been fantastic, and I want to be mindful and gracious of your time. Ryan, I have two questions left. The first is, you have a lot of different ways that people can get involved with you. You've got a book, you've got a ton of information, education out there, and then some ways that people can go and work with you directly. Where's the best place for people to go if they want to get more involved or go deeper in your world?
There's three places, and hopefully we can provide them here for y'all. But the H2H method.com, the H, the number two, H method.com. That's our philosophy, strategy, values, frameworks on how we go about cold calling of the 21st century. And our entire team at Superhuman follows that method and has good success with setting up meetings. I'll kind of share some places you can hear our team, but that's a place you can get the book. There's a course on cold calling all our team members have to take that we offer to the public. There's some cold call education on our 5 frameworks. So think of it as the strategic templates that we use, and you can input product service knowledge in there. We have an AI script tool called Suede. So it was built with the power of AI, but combined with our methodology. So when you're writing scripts, it considers the methodology within it and creates a scripting kind of platform for you instead of having to just use Google Docs or something. Also, superhumanprospecting.com. That's our premium outsourced SDR service. We do list building, calling, and emailing with all USA based team members. And we do compliant dials. We're doing just manual dials right now, but we're going to be doing compliant auto dials next year. Also, we do quick cold calls. So this is kind of a bite-sized cold calling service if you're a small business or an AE even, and you want to try out an alternative to, say, freelancers. That's a great option as well. It's the same call team, streamlined service.
Yeah, we'll put all those in the show notes for you guys. Last question for you, Ryan. In your opinion, what is the secret to scaling a business?
I would say, first of all, believing and knowing and also believing that you have a product that's going to impact people positively and having a manifesto behind that product. Because I think early on and as you grow, you'll have deep roots in when things get tough as to why you're doing this. And I think it has to do with why the product itself. The next would be, I would say, good process and ensuring that there's efficiencies that are effective, that don't take up a lot of your time or a lot of your team members' time. And that's key. You don't want to just shove off tasks to someone when you want to really create a replica of yourself and someone who's thinking the same way you are, which leads to the third one, which is people on the bus. So the Jim Collins adage around putting the right people on the bus to operate those processes. And that takes time as well.